What happens when an engineer on the front lines dares to think faster than the generals? He is punished for his initiative until his ideas begin to be used secretly throughout the army. You ever try to do the right thing, the honest-to-God right thing, and end up paying for it like you stole something? Yeah, that was me. Fall of '44, stationed out near Oita, Japan. And no, I wasn't born with a rifle in my hands or stripes on my sleeves. I was a radio man, a signal guy, one of those poor fools who still thought brains mattered more than brass. I had been yanked out of my university lab and thrown into a uniform because I knew too much to be left alone. Translation: I was too smart for the room, and they didn't trust smart folks. That's how you end up babysitting radar equipment and pretending to respect orders barked by men who couldn't wire a flashlight without blowing their eyebrows off. We'd been hearing rumors for months. High-flying American bombers that couldn't be touched. B-29s, ghosts in the sky. They flew higher, faster, deadlier. The brass kept calling them overrated. I kept my mouth shut, but I knew better. I'd seen the signals, heard the whispers in the static. Then, one day, a bird went down. That B-29 and got clipped somewhere over Kyushu and crashed hard in a rice field. Thing was burning like hell, smoke curling up like a signal to every farm dog and nosy old man within 10 miles. But not all of it burned. We got there before the scavengers did. The villagers had already circled it like it was a fallen god. Kids throwing rocks, old women praying, one guy trying to rip off a propeller blade like it was going to fit in his living room. But me? I saw gold, not real gold, tech gold. Inside the wreckage, half fused to what was left of the fuselage, was a radar unit. Sleek, sophisticated, unlike anything I'd seen come out of Japanese hands. It wasn't just for flying. This was targeting gear. Precise, small, powerful, and they left it behind. I radioed the base, but they told me to secure the area and await orders. Orders? In this war. By the time those came, the thing would have been hauled off by some corporal with a crowbar and an ego. So I did the only thing that made sense. I disobeyed. We loaded that radar up in the back of a farm truck, me, 2 enlisted kids, and a driver who looked like he'd rather be fishing. We covered it in tarps, rolled it back to base, and by nightfall I was up to my elbows in wires and wonder. 3 straight days I spent in the lab, no sleep, no bath. Just solder, notes, and caffeine pills that tasted like chalk. And what I saw scared the hell out of me. This wasn't navigation. This was guidance. This thing could map cities from the sky. Pinpoint targets in the dark. No more guessing. No more bombing somewhere near the shipyard. If this got rolled out across the fleet, Tokyo was toast. Osaka too. So I did what any sane man would do. I wrote up a report. Detailed, technical, backed with readings, schematics, the works. I handed it off to the technical commander himself, a man named Colonel Takeda. Always looked like he'd just smelled something bad. He read the first page, then flipped it shut. Didn't even fake interest. "You removed it without authorization?" he asked, deadpan. "I secured it before it could be looted or destroyed, sir." "You're not intelligence. I'm an engineer. I recognized its importance." He sighed. "One of those long, theatrical sighs officers do when they want you to feel small. You're out of line, Lieutenant Inoue." And just like that, I was dismissed. The next morning, 2 guards came to escort me to the holding barracks. No cuffs, no yelling, just quiet shame and a slip of paper. Violation of protocol. Violation. That's what they called it. Not foresight, not initiative. A violation. As they walked me through the hallway, I saw the same young officers who used to nod at me avert their eyes. The same technicians who asked for help with signal tuning now acted like I'd stolen their lunch. And just when I thought it couldn't sting worse, I saw Takeda again. Hands folded, lips tight, eyes full of that bureaucratic calm. "You want to save the Empire?" he said. "Obey orders." I should have felt angry, but what I felt was worse. I felt nothing, because in that moment I understood something ugly. They didn't want the truth. They wanted order, control, and if the truth made them look weak or wrong, they'd sooner lock it up and throw away the key. So there I was, stripped of my clearance, kicked out of the lab, sitting on a cold cot, staring at the wall, knowing I'd touched something that could have changed everything. And no one gave a damn. Not because it wasn't real, but because it wasn't theirs. That was the day I stopped believing this war was about victory. It was about pride. And pride was going to kill us faster than any bomb. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how this story unfolds. Not when the heat really starts to rise in Chapter 2. I spent 3 days in what they politely called a containment barrack. Nothing polite about it. It was a windowless prefab room that smelled like old rope and diesel, with one flickering bulb overhead that made a buzzing sound like it was judging you. They took my uniform belt, locked the door from the outside, and left me to sit. No charges, no trial, just silence. The military kind, the kind that says you messed up by thinking too much. At first, I waited. Told myself someone would come, someone reasonable, someone who'd read my report and say, well, hell, Inoue was right. But nobody came. Not the colonel, not even the cowardly clerk who handed me the disciplinary slip. So I did what a man does when he's cornered. I replayed every second of what happened, not to doubt it, but to etch it into memory. If they were going to pretend this never happened, I sure wasn't. The radar. Let's talk about it. It had 3 distinct modules. One was pulsing even after the crash, running on emergency reserves. That told me it had layered redundancy. These American engineers built it like they expected their planes to go down, but wanted their tech to keep talking. The frequency range, unlike ours, narrower but smarter. And the sync patterns, designed to rotate live with the bomb bay. In short, this machine didn't just see, it aimed, it remembered. You can't unsee something like that. But I wasn't the only one who saw it. 2 days after they locked me up, I heard boots. Not the usual slow shuffle kind from guards. These were urgent, sharp. A key rattled. The door opened. Bright hallway lights spilling into my little concrete tomb. And there he stood, Lieutenant Watanabe. Younger than me, clean uniform, clean face. The kind of guy who polished his belt buckle just to feel accomplished. But his face, pale. "Inoue-san," he said, voice low. "They moved the radar." Moved. I sat up stiff from the cot. They sent it to Tokyo Command, under seal. He looked around before stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "And they scrubbed your report." Scrubbed. That word hit harder than the confinement. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "they erased a direct intelligence opportunity because it didn't come with a stamp?" Watanabe didn't answer, but his silence said everything. They were scared. Not of me, of what it meant. If I was right, then their whole command structure, their outdated tactics, their bragging about honor and code was a sand castle facing a tide, and they didn't want to believe it. So they buried it. Just like that. Now here's the part that makes your blood boil. A week later, they released me. No explanation, no apology. Just a new assignment slip and the same damn uniform, still creased from being stuffed in a drawer. I was told I'd been reassigned to clerical duty back near Fukuoka. No more lab, no more gear, back to pencils and filing cabinets. As I walked out, I passed Colonel Takeda in the corridor. He didn't stop, didn't look at me, just said, flat as a boot heel, "You had potential, but you let it speak too loudly." That was it. Not even the decency of anger, just bureaucracy wearing a face. At my new post, I was invisible, assigned to supply logs, cross-checking serial numbers of rifles we didn't even have. Every time I tried to bring up the radar unit, I got cold stares or thin smiles, the kind that say, "We heard. We don't want to hear it again." But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. I started writing, quietly, not reports, diagrams from memory, notes on the frequency bands, sketches of the pulse width readings. I had no tools, no schematics, no samples, but I had 3 days of obsessive hands-on time, and that was more than they deserved. I tucked it all into a ledger I pretended was a logistics journal, hidden between fake pages of bullet counts and food supply tallies. Every lunch break I wrote. Every night I etched another circuit from memory, and all the while I listened to whispers from pilots, from radar operators, from one poor guy who came back half-deaf from a run over Saipan, mumbling about how the Americans always saw us coming. Of course they did. We gave them time. We let our pride get in the way of our survival. And the worst part? I started hearing rumors that the Tokyo lab was reviewing the unit, that it was damaged beyond replication, that its value was limited due to foreign design principles. In other words, they didn't understand it, so they shelved it. They shelved the thing that could have changed our air war. You want to know what that does to a man? It splits you. You still put on the uniform, still nod at your superiors, still follow protocol. But inside, you're gone. They called it obedience. I called it betrayal. And one night, while watching a truck full of empty ammo crates pull into the depot, I made a decision. If they weren't going to listen, I'd find someone who would. Not because I wanted glory. I didn't want my name on anything. I just wanted us to last long enough to see the next sunrise. Because at this rate, we were handing the sky to the enemy, and all I could think about was that radar, sitting in a vault, collecting dust, while our boys flew blind. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stick around to see how this man, with no power, no backing, no rank, fights back in Chapter 3. Sometimes the fate of war is decided, not on the battlefield, but in the silence of a laboratory. If you are interested in forgotten feats, hidden mistakes, and the true price of innovation, subscribe to the channel. Here you will learn what textbooks don't tell you. What do you think? Is someone who disobeyed orders to save their country a hero? Write your opinion in the comments. Your point of view is important. You ever try to work with your hands tied and your mouth stitched shut? That's what it felt like. They threw me into a supply room in Fukuoka like I was some intern with a typewriter and a bad attitude. My lab coat was gone. My tools? Gone. The respect? That had never even showed up to begin with. They called it a reassignment. I called it what it was. Quiet punishment. The kind where they don't yell, don't hit. They just erase you slowly, like you were pencil on a cheap government form. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. By then, I'd memorized the guts of that radar unit like scripture. The wiring sequences, the pulse delays, the way it danced between bands like a ghost. It was all still in my head. And that head was still working no matter how many ledgers they tossed on my desk. So I got creative. They gave me boxes to track. Fine. I tracked them. But in between tallying rifles and rations, I started building, not with tools, with ink. I wrote, on the backs of manifests, between the lines of requisition slips, page after page of circuit layouts, signal flow maps, power isolation grids. It was risky. If anyone had opened that book and actually read it, they'd know I wasn't just filing inventory. I was rebuilding a piece of American war tech from nothing but memory and spite. But that's the funny thing about bureaucracy. They're so busy checking boxes, they forget to read what's inside them. I'd work all day filing nonsense, then stay late claiming I was reorganizing the storeroom. In reality, I was flipping crates to make a table, laying out pages, testing logic chains in my head. It was lonely work. No lab assistants, no equipment. Just me and a stubby pencil half the length it used to be. But then one evening, quiet just after dusk, a knock came, not on the door. On the side window, the kind they kept nailed shut. I turned, thinking it was the wind. Then I saw him. Watanabe, that same clean-sleeved lieutenant from the last post. Except now, his collar was a little looser, his face a little older. War had a way of scrubbing the shine off people real fast. I let him in through the back, past the ration bins. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "They reassigned me too," he said, brushing dust off his pants. But not before I heard what Tokyo said about the radar. My spine stiffened. "Let me guess. Classified and inconclusive." He nodded. "They said it couldn't be replicated, that it relied on foreign thinking." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was stupid. "Foreign thinking," I muttered. "Like logic has a passport." Watanabe looked down, then pulled something from his coat. A folded page. Not military stock. Civilian paper, printed in English. I unfolded it. A diagram. Grainy, blurry, but unmistakable. "It's from a POW technician," he said. "One of ours managed to smuggle it from an internment site. It's a maintenance page from their onboard radar manual." I stared at it, then back at him. "You came here with this." He nodded. "You're the only one I know who'd know what to do with it." For a moment I didn't say a thing, because this was more than paper. This was proof. Proof that the Americans weren't just ahead. They were organized. Their systems were replicable, documented. And the fact that we were still arguing over who had the authority to analyze one downed unit, that was a death sentence written in kanji. I looked him in the eye. "You didn't show this to command." "I'm not stupid," he said. "They'd bury it, or me with it." That night we worked side by side under a dim storeroom bulb, comparing notes, mapping signals, matching frequencies, and for the first time in weeks I felt awake, alive. Not because it was easy, but because I wasn't alone anymore. We weren't just scribbling. We were building a case, quietly, one that might, just might, convince someone outside the chain of command to act. But here's the rub. When you try to outthink the system gets nervous. It doesn't come at you with guns. It comes with whispers. 2 days later, I got called in. Not by a colonel, not even by my direct superior. A liaison officer from Tokyo. Clean hands, crisp cuffs, eyes like polished stone. "We've received word," he said, "that you're continuing unauthorized technical analysis." "No," I said calmly. I'm reorganizing inventory." He didn't smile, didn't blink. "You've been seen drawing schematics." I opened the ledger, flipped to a blank page. "Is this against regulation?" "Depends what's on the page." We stared at each other for a long moment. "Let me ask you something," I said. "If I were sketching poetry, would you care?" "This is war, Lieutenant. We care about everything." That's when I knew. I wasn't just a nuisance. I was a liability. The system didn't want innovation. It wanted silence. It wanted obedience with a stamp on it. And any idea, no matter how good, was dangerous if it didn't come through official channels. So I nodded. "Understood, sir." He left, but the message stayed. I burned the original schematics that night, every last page. Not because I was afraid, because I knew what was coming. I started copying them by hand into smaller notebooks. Code words, abbreviated notes, folded into supply crates and mailed up the chain. Not through military lines, through civilians, old professors, engineers who owed me favors. You can try to shut a man down, but ideas, if you plant them right, they grow roots. I didn't know who'd find those notes, or when, but I knew one thing: they'd outlive me. Because the truth, you can lock it up, you can bury it under paperwork, but it doesn't go away. It waits, it festers, and one day it rises, even if the man who wrote it disappears. Stick around. Chapter 4 shows exactly what happens when a planted idea starts to crack the concrete. This isn't the end, not even close. It started with a slip. Not mine, theirs. 1 week after I mailed out the second wave of copied schematics through civilian channels, I got word from a janitor. That's right, a janitor. Old man Nishida. Moved like his knees were made of gravel and wore the same patchy hat every day. But he saw everything, heard everything. Because people never stopped talking when he was around, they just figured he was invisible. That was their mistake. He walked past my storage desk one morning and dropped a scrap of paper like it was trash. Kept moving. Didn't look back. On it, a hand-drawn symbol, simple, but I knew it. It was the mark I'd hidden on the inside back cover of one of the dummy ledgers, one I'd sent to a contact in Tokyo, someone I hadn't heard from in months. So how the hell did a janitor in Fukuoka know about it? I folded the note into my pocket and didn't react. Lesson 1. When the system's watching, don't flinch. You could trip over a body in the hallway. Just nod, step around it, and go sharpen your pencil. That night I went to the back corner of the warehouse. Past the unlogged crates and rusted tools, no one cared to inventory. And there it was. A box that shouldn't be there. No label, no stamps, no requisition tag. I cracked the lid, slow, like something might jump out. Inside, paper, stacked, neatly. Familiar handwriting, not mine, but close. Someone had copied my schematics, rebuilt them, expanded them, and attached to the top a note. "Inui-san, you were right. Keep going." That was it. No name, no rank. Just proof that someone, somewhere, wasn't playing by the rules either. I stood there for a long time, holding that page, because in a world built on silence, even one whisper back feels like thunder. But you know how this goes. You push a little, and the system pushes harder. The next morning, my work schedule changed. I wasn't on supplies anymore. I was moved to personnel support, code for watch list. They had someone shadowing me, not in uniform. Slick shoes, slicker hair, always reading a newspaper but never turning the page. They didn't confront me. That wasn't their style. They just tightened the rope, Shorter breaks. Surprise inspections. Questions that sounded casual but weren't. You've been at this post a while, haven't you, Lieutenant? Still writing your little notes? What's your opinion on chain of command? It was like being pecked to death by polite birds, but I smiled, nodded, played dumb. Because while they were busy watching me, they missed what was happening under their own feet. See, I wasn't the only one copying things anymore. The ideas were spreading. One mechanic started tweaking rangefinders after reading a memo I accidentally left behind. A signals officer in Nagasaki began logging unexplained radar pings before each bombing run. A technician from Osaka built a prototype jammer using parts salvaged from crashed planes. None of it official, none of it authorized, all of it effective. And that scared them, because nothing terrifies a rigid system more than proof that improvisation works. And the cracks started to show. At first, it was in the reports. Unexpected detection range from base radar. Unidentified interference on bombing approach vectors. Improvised calibration resulted in increased signal clarity. Every time one of those came through, I underlined it in red. Not for ego, for evidence. But command, they didn't celebrate. They interrogated. Who authorized these modifications? Why was standard procedure bypassed? Is this consistent with imperial doctrine? Doctrine. Well, there's a word that'll kill progress faster than fire. They couldn't deny the results, so they attacked the process. Pulled officers into meetings. Threatened court-martials for unauthorized innovation. Can you believe that? Court-martials. For improving performance during wartime. But the more they pushed, the more people pushed back, quietly, carefully. One evening, a sergeant I'd never spoken to before stopped me in the hallway. "You're the radar guy, right?" I paused. "Used to be." He looked over his shoulder, then handed me a folded packet. "I made adjustments, based on your sketches. It works." "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because if they burn me," he said, "I want someone to know it wasn't for nothing." And just like that, I became an archive. People started slipping notes into crates, diagrams into ration logs, messages into boot orders, every scrap added to the picture, every voice layered onto the signal. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were adapting, evolving. But that's when the system stopped pretending. They sent for me. A summons, formal, stamped. Technical Review Committee, Central HQ. They wanted me in Tokyo, not to honor me, to shut me down for good. I packed light, a notebook, a pencil, the original circuit sketch, folded 8 times and hidden in the lining of my uniform. Before I left, I walked through the supply depot one last time, past the crates, past the workers, past the night shift guard who used to call me traitor behind my back and now just looked away. And I smiled, because I knew something they didn't. They thought this was about one man, one radar, one act of insubordination. But it wasn't. It was a signal. And it had already bounced too far, too wide, and too deep to be stopped now. Keep your eyes open. In Chapter 5, that signal finally hits command, and when it does, someone's going to have to answer for it. Tokyo was colder than I remembered. Not the weather, the feeling, like the whole city was holding its breath and waiting for someone else to exhale first. Men in uniform walked faster here, eyes straight ahead, boots too polished, voices too calm. You could feel it, a place pretending the war wasn't already crawling under its own skin. They flew me in, under the title Technical Witness. No explanation, no charges, Just a one-line order and a train ticket that smelled like fresh ink and stale coffee. At Central HQ, they walked me through 3 layers of checkpoints like I was either royalty or radioactive. I didn't ask which. The room they put me in was too clean. Long table, 1 chair on my side, 6 on theirs. Water in a polished glass I didn't touch. On the wall, a framed map of the Pacific, outdated by at least 6 months. Territories marked in proud red ink that had already turned into smoke. A bell rang. The door opened, and in came the committee, not in uniform, not in formation, just 5 men and 1 woman, coats, folders, and expressions carved from the same stone. No names offered, just ranks and eyes that weighed you like cargo. The man in the center spoke first. "Lieutenant Inouye, you've been circulating unsanctioned technical material, unauthorized, unvetted, unsecured." He didn't ask, he stated, like reading a grocery list. I stayed quiet. He continued, "Your activities have resulted in unapproved field modifications, communications inconsistencies, command deviations. You understand this compromises operational integrity." I looked at him, then glanced around the table. "Operational integrity," I said. "Is that what we're calling denial these days?" That earned me a slight shift in one man's jaw. The rest didn't flinch. The woman leaned forward. "Lieutenant, you're here to explain your intentions. We're giving you that chance." My intentions. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folded schematic. 8 creases, smudged edges. The original. What started it all? I laid it flat on the table. "My intention," I said, "was to stop this war from chewing up men faster than we could replace them. To see past red tape. To do something before it was too late." One of them tapped a pen. "Do you acknowledge that you bypassed command structure?" "Yes." "Do you regret it?" "No." Silence. The lead officer finally looked down, scanned the schematic. "Impressive reconstruction," he said, "but speculative." "It worked," I said. "It's already working. Field teams are reporting better detection ranges. Interference jamming. Some of them don't even know why it's working. They're just following copies of what I started." He folded his hands. "Lieutenant, this isn't a debate on function, it's about discipline." There it was. Not truth, not strategy. Discipline. I leaned in, slow. "You can throw me out, strip my title, burn the papers, but you can't unsend what's already been sent. You can't unbuild what's already been built. The signal's out there now, you're too late." That made them uncomfortable. Not angry. Uncomfortable, because deep down they knew I was right. The woman spoke again. "This isn't how military systems work, Lieutenant. Structure matters. Chain of command matters." I smiled, flat. "Tell that to the B-29s. Tell that to the cities burning while you debate paperwork." Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, a voice from the corner. One of the men who hadn't said a word. He spoke softly. "I've seen the reports. I've read the data. These modifications, they're real." The others turned to him like he'd broken a spell. He went on. "And maybe it's time we ask why the structure can't adapt, instead of punishing the people who do." Nobody responded. He looked at me, met my eyes, then back to them. "I recommend we declassify the field reports. Cross-examine with engineering. Bring in Lieutenant Inouye as a consultant, under oversight if necessary." The lead officer didn't react. He just tapped the edge of the table twice. "Meeting adjourned," he said, and they all stood up. No conclusion, no verdict. Just the same quiet fog they came in with. I was told to wait in the hall. 2 hours passed. No one came. Then a junior aide walked up and handed me a note. No envelope. Just one sentence. You're cleared to return to post. Technical clearance suspended. Observation pending. That was it. No thank you, no apology, no acknowledgement of the work, the risk, the lives it might have saved. Just a pat on the head and a muzzle for the road. But I didn't care, because they didn't say stop. They said observe. And in this system, that was as close to surrender as I was going to get from them. I left that building with no medals, no promotion, no speech. Just my hands in my pockets and a mind still humming with unfinished circuits. And as I stepped out onto the Tokyo street, cold air biting, the sky wide open above me, I knew exactly what I had to do next. The final chapter isn't about revenge, it's about resolve. Stay with this story, because what happens next proves that even in a system built to crush you, a single act of clarity can leave a crack big enough for change to break through. I came back to Fukuoka in the same uniform they gave me when I left. Still the same stripes, still the same boots. But something had shifted. Not in me, in them. The guards, who used to barely nod, now stood up a little straighter when I walked by. The clerks didn't look down when I passed. And the quartermaster, the one who once laughed when I asked for soldering wire, offered me a smoke without a word. They didn't say anything out loud, but they knew. They knew I'd gone toe-to-toe with the structure and walked out without being erased. And in a place like this, that's louder than medals, I returned to my storage post, but the room felt different now, like it had grown, or maybe I had. Either way, I wasn't just filing boxes anymore. I was a signal. I didn't ask for new clearance. I didn't push for lab access. I just kept doing what I was doing, quietly, carefully, and with the kind of intent that didn't need permission. And the funny thing, they started sending people to me. First, it was a mechanic from the North Depot. Heard you know a thing or two about range-finding circuits, he said, like it was a question. It wasn't. Then a field operator showed up with his notebook. Been picking up weird echoes lately. Thought maybe you'd know what to make of it. I looked at his data. I knew exactly what it was. American radar refraction. The very thing we were blind to a year ago. Only now, we weren't so blind anymore. The ripple had turned into a wave. More and more reports started flowing through unofficial channels. Field improvements, calibration tweaks, low-cost mods made with salvaged parts and handwritten diagrams. Diagrams that looked suspiciously familiar. They weren't citing me. That's not how this system worked, but they were using the work. And I'll take that over credit any day. One morning I opened a sealed crate that hadn't been logged yet. Inside was a brand new radar component. Not from Tokyo Command. From a local base. One I'd never even contacted. Taped to the top, a note. No manual, no label. Just try it. I did. It was crude, but effective. An improvised amplification coil, based on a design I'd scribbled in a mess hall 6 months ago. They'd taken it, changed it, improved it, and then passed it back. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was evolution. A quiet, stubborn evolution. The kind that doesn't ask for approval and doesn't wait for orders. The kind that grows in cracks and shadows right under the feet of those too proud to bend. And the best part, Command hadn't figured it out yet. They still thought they were in control, still believed every decision had to pass through them. But the field was moving. The operators were adapting. The chain of command was no longer a chain. It was a net. Wide, messy, and impossible to track. We weren't breaking the rules. We were writing new ones. And I was just one node in the circuit. One spark in a line that stretched across bunkers and tents and supply rooms. Even Watanabe sent word again, from a base outside Nagoya. His message was short. "They're testing the jammer. Results look promising. You were right." I burned the message after reading it. Not out of fear, out of habit. By now I had enough smoke in my lungs to know when to keep things clean, but I kept the last line. Wrote it on the inside of a ration box with a dull pencil. You were right. Not because I needed the praise, but because someday, long after the war ended, when some clerk found that box, I wanted them to know. Someone saw it coming. Someone did something. And no, they didn't give me a medal, didn't throw a parade, didn't even bump my rank. But a week before I was scheduled to rotate out, a new order came in. From Central. No sender, no explanation. Just a one-line assignment. Report to Technical Division, Yokosuka Base. Effective immediately. Now, if you know anything about Yokosuka, you know what that meant. Not exile. Not punishment. Access. The kind of access that came with tools, data, labs, and finally, a seat at the damn table. I packed light. Again, just a notebook and a memory. Because I knew what I was walking into. Not a welcome party, not a lab full of believers, but a place where people would listen. And when I got there, first thing I saw, on the wall behind the desk, was a schematic. Not mine, not directly, but the shape was there, the pulse width, the dual modulation bands, the sync control curve. All of it. They didn't say thank you, but they did copy everything. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's how change works. Not with applause, with echoes. This was never about one man. It was about the signal he sent. Thank you for following the whole story. If it moved you, even a little, share it. Some truths aren't taught in classrooms. They're whispered from one stubborn voice to another,